This podcast is brought to you by Irrigation Today magazine, the only publication solely focused on on-farm irrigation. For more information, go to www.irrigationtoday.org.
This podcast was brought to you by Irrigation and Green Industry, the leading business magazine for landscape and irrigation contractors. For the latest industry news and the digital edition, visit www.igin.com.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Bringing Water Life podcast. I'm John Farn of the Irrigation Association. We're not going to have a regular co-host with me today. Instead, I have two industry stalwarts. Is that a good way to describe you guys? Stalwarts, known entities in the irrigation industry. I'm here with Trevor, Mecham, and Warren Gorowitz. Hey, guys. How are you?
Good. How you doing, John?
Good, John. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Warren, I think you have been a guest more in this podcast than any other one of our guests ever. So I'm just waiting for you to become a co-host soon.
It helps when you know the right people and when you pay them the right amount of money, and anything can happen.
What right people do you know? I think you know the wrong people. I have to be coerced into this podcast more than once. Trevor's like, I'm gonna do this once and never again.
One and done.
One and done. So a lot has happened. We've been recording a few of these off and on the past couple of weeks, really focused on COVID-19. We could talk about COVID-19, the coronavirus, and the industry if you guys want. But I've been wanting to do this theme for a podcast for a while now, and that is sustainability. And Warren, we'll start with you. And I want to give some background here a little bit, but during your presidency of the Irrigation Association, your common theme throughout your presidency was sustainability. And like many of our presidents for the Irrigation Association, you want to leave a mark, both within the association and, quite frankly, the industry. And you want to have something to show for it. And I think yours, without putting words in your mouth, but I will anyway, that was sustainability, right? Is that a fair statement to make?
That is a fair statement.
Yeah. So we created some different initiatives around that. And since then, you've been working to build out some capacity, some form of programming that everyone in the irrigation industry can take advantage of and participate in. And then March came and the world was hit with, United States was hit with the coronavirus, and things kind of slowed down a little bit with our efforts, right? Yeah, and so we're kind of picking it back up. And now we get to this podcast. Now, before we go any further, let's get to know you guys. Trevor, start with you.
Yeah.
You are with, let me read your background, Valley Irrigation, a Valmont company. So how long you been with Valley, man?
Just about 2 years.
2 years?
Yeah, but I grew up in the industry in agriculture. So I grew up 3 generations of potato farming in southern Idaho. Mm-hmm. And I got into the tech space kind of when it was just emerging in the late 90s. And so held various roles with it. Was it, from dealership level, and then also to some of the OEMs, large equipment manufacturers as well, just to get a feel for it, right? It was something that I've always had a passion for ag. I've always had a passion for precision technology, and having an opportunity to come to then the irrigation side. Grew up with irrigation, obviously, and potatoes, what you're going to do. So this has been an interesting time. It's been a great experience for me thus far, and learning more about the irrigation side of the business as well. So this is it's kind of fun. So, and I'm just grateful to be a part of this.
I have to ask you guys, have you seen Space Force on Netflix yet?
No, I've been hearing about it.
Only the previews.
Only previews. Okay, you have not. Okay, I recommend. It's not getting great reviews.
Right.
I'm a big Steve Carell and Greg Daniels, who's behind The Office, Parks and Rec. He's also behind Space Force. So I'm a big fan of both of those guys. And you're wondering, why in the world is this guy bringing this up? I don't want to give out many spoilers here, but one of the episodes, Steve Carell, who runs Space Force for a fictional president who seems a lot like President Trump, goes and they have a simulation of living on the moon. So they go out in this simulated area, and it's quarantined, it's off, it's on their base, but it's off, and you put on the spacesuit to go and walk into this quarantine area. So he walks in, and in there is a full habitat, right, where they have different kinds of farming opportunities, where they have different hydroponic ways of growing, what should be fruits and vegetables and different things you eat. So it's pretty cool, right? So this ties back to agriculture and different opportunities of how you can actually sustain life without an atmosphere, like on, the moon, Mars, et cetera, which is one of the goals of, I think, our Space Force. Anyway, so he walks in there and he's like, okay, what's to eat? And the only thing they're farming is potatoes. So it's potatoes everywhere. So it's mashed potatoes, raw potatoes. You see him just take a bite out of a potato to like an apple. So
he did that. Yeah, he did that in harvest. He did. Yeah. No time to stop, sleep. It was literally peel a potato, put it on the manifold of the tractor. Come lunchtime, that was your meal. You're ready to roll.
So different ways of growing and eating potatoes, right?
Right. There's the whole biosphere project that went on in Tucson, which was kind of creating that, kind of similar thing in real life, actually being able to kind of grow things and sustain life in general during in that kind of a very encapsulated environment.
Yeah, no, anyway, check it out. It's funny, but you talk about growing potatoes, when you think of him walking into that area and just potatoes everywhere.
All right. My headset's dying right now. It's beeping in my ear. Perfect timing. Hold on. Let me switch. Couldn't be, I guess I didn't charge it overnight.
So Warren came very, very prepared for this. Warren, I was going to go to you next, man. Can you hear me okay? Is your mic on? Your mic's not on, man. So Trevor, let's talk a little bit about your responsibilities as Warren's getting his mic figured out. Your responsibilities at Valley. What are you doing for Valley these days?
So my role really entails looking at a lot of the new technology and innovation in terms of what's on the horizon, what is the vision that we have, what is really some of the interesting things that we can then adapt and apply into the irrigation industry. Not always just on pivots, right? But really the surrounding ecosystem of the ag piece. And that's really kind of where my role is, to look at that, look at the products that we currently have. What is it that we can do to kind of future-proof ourselves? And when we look at that, clearly sustainability is a huge part of it, is being able to do more with less. So that's really kind of been my key role in being able to look at that. And also from an industry perspective is seeing what is it that we are having to do, but what to adapt to a lot of what the growers are having to adapt to and a lot of the challenges they face. Looking at the new almost norm as it exists today with COVID and everything else, there's a lot of those examples that are on our boilerplate today. So that's really kind of looking at that, assessing it, and seeing that we can have a plan and something that's really, structured around how we introduce a lot of these things to help our growers.
Yeah. And Warren, are you with us? Can I hear you now?
I don't know. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Okay, absolutely.
okay.
That's like the Verizon commercial. Can you hear me now?
That was all for show.
That is all for show. That's right. Now, I'm going to ask you. You're with Hunter Industries now, and I'm not sure if you've been a member of this podcast since you left Ewing Irrigation and moved over to Hunter. But how long have you been with Hunter now, Warren?
You know what? It's almost 10 months.
10 months. Okay, so you're almost at a year anniversary.
It's after spending 25 years.
Yeah.
A great 25 years at Ewing Irrigation and Landscape Supply. 10 months has gone by. It's almost a year.
Yeah. And what are your responsibilities at Hunter?
So I'm our Director of Corporate Social Responsibility, and so involved with managing all of our CSR, that's short CSR, not customer service.
The trade lingo,
Yeah, well, people say CSR and people think customer service.
There'll be a quiz later.
Okay. So I'm responsible for all of our CSR efforts across all of our companies, and so that ties to kind of our three areas of people, planet, and profit, around our employee engagement, around our charitable giving, spending a lot of time working on internally on all of our processes and how we can create or how we have created pretty aggressive CSR goals that were actually created before I arrived at Hunter, around reducing our impact on the environment, and also being able to also be a good steward in our industry and use the platform that we have, this being one of them.
Yeah.
And that's honestly, that was selfishly one of my goals back when I was president, of the IA, as you talked about earlier, about trying to work on getting the entire industry to work together towards some of these challenges, which we haven't really done, at least in my experience, very well. And so being able to do that around the sustainability space. So sustainability is part of corporate social responsibility on the environmental aspect of it as well. So it's been really interesting for me because spending 25 years in distribution, I knew that part of the industry really, really well, and to kind of go up the supply chain to manufacturer and understanding manufacturing. And by no means am I an engineer, but I'm certainly learning all the processes and what goes into creating a product, from an idea to the design aspect to producing it to actually getting it out to our customers, and trying to now incorporate sustainability into that whole process. So we think about like end of life of products when they're designed, as opposed to, okay, now what do we do with this material or this product once it's been thrown away because it's not needed anymore. So it's been really a lot of fun. I'm really enjoying it. It's kind of like a it was the next evolution in my career, and the really interesting thing, and this has nothing to do with necessarily the career aspect, but the fact that spending 130 days on the road traveling, and to go from that, I mean, I've never been home this long in my life, in my career. And so it's definitely been interesting to adapt to that. And, so it's been fun.
Well, I want to start out really broad first. I want to dig in, and I'll start with Trevor. And I have a definition of sustainability in my mind, right? Yep. And we can ask 10 different people just walking down the street who are familiar with sustainability, right? Mm-hmm. How do you define sustainability? And they could define it 10 different ways. Right. So in your mind, Trevor, what are the core elements, or how do you define sustainability?
Well, there's always been your standard textbook answer, which is, development that meets the needs of the present and without compromising of what's really for the future. Yeah. Right. I mean, that is is a part of it, but layman's terms for that to a grower into where we live is doing more with less. Right. Mm-hmm. And that's really what we have to thrive on. And that's what we're really trying to drive towards, I think, at the end of the day. And so, I think, and it's not to give, a lecture on sustainability per se as a part of it, especially to the growers as a population. I think they know and understand what that really means. Truthfully known, when you look at sustainability, when you look at the farming population, they were, they've always been environmentalists. Right. They were green before green was a movement, before it was cool. They grow, right. They feed, they clothe, all of those pieces as a part of that. And I think, for them, it's just in the simple way, it's just really trying to figure out how you're going to do that in an ever growing population that is no longer a buzz marketing campaign. It's the reality that's starting to sink in and set. Mm-hmm. Right. And the new piece as it exists today is, I think, it's becoming more apparent, and there's more of an awareness of that than ever before. Right. Than ever before.
How about you, Warren? The definition.
Definition.
How do you define it?
When I was my master's program at Arizona State University, they provided us a quote, and it's from a gentleman named Sir Crispin Tickle. Anyway,
oh my gosh! Too bad I'm done having kids, because that would be a fantastic.
I think I got his name right, hopefully. But he said, it's treating the world like we're here to stay. And so it is the environmental aspect of taking care of the planet that we live on. And John, we've talked about this in the past, and Trevor, you just mentioned it too. I mean, our industry, the roots of our industry is being green, no pun intended. I mean, that's what mm-hmm. we do every day. That's the interesting thing, and that was actually my capstone project in grad school, was trying to create kind of an industry-wide initiative on getting all the facets of our industry together, from the ag side to the turf and landscape side to growers to or I should say nurseries, to the design side, contractors, everything in between, to talk about kind of the benefits of the spaces that we create and manage and design, create and manage every day. And that to me is what sustainability is about in our industry standpoint. And we can, politicize it in the tree hugger terms and all this other stuff and turn people off immediately when we do that, and so that's the thing is just like, how do you create a good dialogue about it where you don't get into that side, you don't try to steer clear of that and just humanize it more about the environmental connection that we have, or the connection that we have with the environment that our people create every day.
Yeah. From and I hear you on the politicizing of the issue, because sustainability has become very political, like a lot of things in this day and age. Morning, Trevor. One of the things that we've been working on as an industry, though, is in ensuring that we really have three pillars of our efforts when it comes to sustainability, because you're right. It's making sure that, our future is not compromised, right? And we look at economic, environmental, and social benefits. Those are kind of three core pillars that we're looking at here when it comes to sustainability, because if you sway more towards the environmental side, the economic side may be affected. But if you look at more at the economic side, the environmental side might be affected. And then you look at the social aspect and how it affects humanity as a whole. And so these all kind of rely on one another. Is that something that you guys, are familiar with, agree with, or have any thoughts on? Trevor?
Go ahead, Warren. No.
Yeah, no.
You first.
Yeah, go, Trevor.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's at the end of the day, when you look at it, right? I mean, as our population continues to grow and it continues to increase, the demand is just, it becomes very difficult to manage. I think at the end of the day, it's kind of what we see, in terms of how we see it and how we've always viewed this. There is, I mean, it becomes, I think, very political in the sense that I look at it from the aspect, and this is, part of me as a grower growing up in the industry, right? The areas that you look at for sustainability is, how am I going to be able to create more sustainable actions when I look at a lot of the job, right? There's 22 million full and part-time jobs that are related to agriculture. You look at, the amount of farms that were lost and that have been lost as a part of basically the last 3, 4, 5 years. And when you look at that kind of diminishing effect, to me, that's where we have to really look at, how do we double down on the sustainability as a part of this. I mean, in 2018 alone, I think there were something right around 12,000 plus farms lost. And when you look at that, and the average farmer feeds about 166 people in a year, those are some interesting facts to really that start to not just become numbers. They become realities of people who go to the market and go, oh my goodness, where's the bread? Yeah. Where's the eggs? Where's the dairy? Where's the right? And so this is where, to me, and probably, this is what Warren has seen more probably, I just with the depth and detail that in his knowledge that he knows. But to me, this is a personal home. It hits home personally for me, just based off of generations of, right? I'm in this to pay it forward still, just because ag's been so good to me. And the irrigation piece of this is astronomical, because if you don't, your biggest opportunity of growth for foods, it's water. Yeah. That's just it, right? And the sustainability factors within that is we have to become more, innovative than ever before. That's the way I see this.
Yeah. I got a question for you, Trevor.
Yeah.
John, can I ask him a question?
No, hey,
absolutely not.
Let me just sit back and relax.
Yeah, no, well, you bring up an interesting point, and I guess what's your perspective on trying to keep food as local as possible? Because I think that from a sustainability standpoint and a continued change or an opportunity for the ag industry, is that something you see becoming more not popular is the wrong word. Is that something you see happening more and more? Because it seems like, the amount of distance that food travels, whether it's from outside the country into the U.S. or whether it's around the U.S., is more. Will that help the industry? Will that help farmers really in the long run or not?
I think the locally grown it's interesting you bring that up. In the last decade, I have seen more, and I'm a huge fan of farmer markets, right? So my family, I take them every Saturday. We love going to farmers market. It was beautiful when we lived in Wisconsin. It was right on the pier in Lake Michigan. And we looked at this and it's like, produced by local farms by, and right. And there is something to be said about that. And it was a great feeling, but the reality of it was, there's only, when we're often I'll call it a Walmart. I call it a Walmart society, right? We want everything. We want it cheap. We want it in one-stop shop as a part of that. And when you're looking at the food production, it doesn't work that way. In terms of, I should say this. It hasn't worked like that in the past. Mm-hmm. I think based off of today's existing situation and moving forward, there's a higher awareness around that piece to say, my goodness, I should be buying local, right? And I think there is a certain amount of feeling around that today that growers are not only wanting that. I feel like a little bit in some way that their voices are now being heard saying, listen, my supply chain effort is I need to get your food to your city, right? And it's on my farm and my crop over here is a part of this. And based off of other, unforeseen circumstances that are out of our control, the gates are closed, the borders are closed, right? There's a larger effort now to look at how can you do that to start growing, and how can you participate to be a part of the solution instead of the problem. And part of that is, I think there is a second look and further evaluation for people to start in normal consumers, at least from what I've seen and walking around into grocery stores today, has been, where is this coming from? I've been watching people literally say, I went to Costco last week as an example, Warren, and I was watching people read the label of where their produce was coming from. What farm was there? I literally nudged my wife and I'm just like, what? You thought I was crazy growing up. I mean, this is just farmer, right? Yeah. Mentality. You want to know where your spuds are grown, and you can ask the restaurateur or whoever. People that you normally wouldn't see doing that are seeing that. So I think there is a bit of more awareness around that piece.
I mean, there's the whole people growing their own food movement again, which is starting to become more popular. I can tell you that we've subscribed to a CSA box, community supported agriculture box, and every Tuesday I get this nice box delivered to my doorstep, and it's all this great fresh produce. And some of it I have no idea what to do with because I don't usually eat some of that stuff, but it's forcing me to try some new things. But I will tell you that the quality and the taste of the food, to me, the produce is incredible. And then there's a sense of supporting local farms in the area, which I really, which is something that's important to me. And I never thought like, wow, and I'm paying for it. It's not cheap. I mean, it's not horribly expensive from that perspective, but it is certainly more than buying stuff at the market, or the grocery store. I could talk a whole thing about Costco.
Well, I have a quick question though. You brought up the Walmart mentality and the Costcos of the world, and I want to take a step back and say this is about the full irrigation industry. So you guys are well representing both the turf and landscape side of the irrigation industry as well as the agricultural side. And when you take our full industry into perspective, it's a lot of water that goes through our technologies, right? Yeah. It's a lot of water. And when you look at our customers can be, our customers are farmers, but take that one step. Who are the farmers' customers, right? And they're going to be, restaurants, are going to be hotels, are going to be grocery stores. And you look at, on the agricultural side, the large grocery store chains, Safeway, Costco, Walmart, Targets of the world. And then you look at the turf and landscape side with whether it's golf courses or even baseball fields, or if it's commercial entities, like the same customers, right? Because they own a lot of land. Mm-hmm. All of these corporate entities, these large customers of agriculture, as well as those who manage properties, have their own sustainability plans, their corporate social responsibility plans that they have in effect. And one of those is related to the environment, and they're looking to save both energy and water. And so the question that I have for you guys, and maybe we'll start with Warren first and then go to Trevor, how is that affecting, your business, your industry, because I know, Warren, you've been involved in LEAD, and they're getting into the sports realm. They're already looking outside of the brick and mortar buildings into the landscape and driving the use of more efficient technologies. But when you look at, what Target's doing, or what even Walmart, they were early adopters looking at different technologies with water savings, energy savings, which quite frankly leads to cost savings for them. How's that driving business, and how is it changing the way you are marketing yourselves in the industry?
I mean, I think, like you said, it's definitely driving business, and the technology side of things is pretty incredible how precise we now can deliver water. And ultimately, as some of these other entities, like you mentioned, kind of get into the outdoor space, specifically around irrigation, some of the challenges, and you're aware of this as well, and you've been involved with this a lot, is some of the organizations aren't always looking at it from the perspective of our industry. And so that's my plug for, people need to be involved and not just think that things are going to take care of themselves if they're not involved, and their voice is important. And obviously that goes with everything in society anymore, I suppose, but specifically to our industry, I think that's something that's really important. But I think this push for corporate sustainability and corporate social responsibility is driving the businesses to require and look closer at their energy and their water usage, which I think provides great opportunities for our industry, for manufacturers in the industry, to continue to improve the technology and make it better for our customers. Smart technology requires smart people, which is, I'm excited to see that this year's Smart Irrigation Month is really all about the people behind smart irrigation. And I think that's such an important thing, because the technology, and we were talking about it a little bit earlier, I think, before we got on the official call or our recording, and the technology is not going to replace people, in my opinion, anytime soon. I still think there's such an important need for that. And so I see it as a great thing. I think that, water costs, be it what they are, continue to drive people to look closer at how they're using their water. I can tell you that moving from Phoenix, Arizona to San Diego, California, and looking at the difference in my water bill, now I'm renting a house right now versus the house that I owned in Phoenix. But, it's exorbitant. It's so exorbitant that I went out on my own, even though I don't own this house, and started changing all my sprinkler nozzles out so they're more efficient, because I can pay for those nozzles and save the water, and based on the water that they save, it's paying for, in 3 months, it's going to pay for the cost to put those nozzles in. It also makes me feel better. And it's going to make my landscape better, this landscape better, which again isn't even mine. So, I think it's definitely a good thing for business and the industry. And I think that, I still think that we have opportunities to continue to improve.
Wait, and before I go to Trevor, I want to follow up real quick on that. And when you look at, because you mentioned not viewing it from the perspective of our industry, and that's absolutely right. And it translates to the ag side as well, because if you look at sustainability, and our industry touches so many aspects of sustainability, the environment, which includes water resources, it can include energy. It talks in what we're growing out of the ground and the benefits that plants have on the turf and landscape side. That affects the sustainability of our ecosystems and our surroundings and our environment. So there's all kinds of things that our industry touches in the realm of sustainability. And if you view it, you as the royal you of society, or decision makers, or whomever, views it from one perspective only. So if I view it only from the water perspective, right? Or I view it only from the landscape perspective, or I view it only from the economic perspective, you're going to come out with different results. And that's been part of the problem, where you need to look at it broadly with what are the ultimate goals here. And our goals on the turf and landscape side are to have a healthy, vibrant landscape with plants that are working, that are living and benefiting our environment while not wasting water to grow those plants, right? So that's the goal, but you're right. Others view it, let's save as much water as possible and forget about everything else. And that's not necessarily the right answer to have in all situations.
Yeah, and I think, and then I know you want Trevor to answer the question. I think
Yeah.
that the other thing we have to be mindful of is that we have to look towards the future of considering any and all alternative water sources to keep our landscapes thriving. And we need to, and whether that's infrastructure-based reclaimed water, whether that's on-site captured water, rainwater harvesting, whatever, I think is going to be our biggest challenge going forward. That if we don't figure out a way to get ahead of this, I think it's going to be required.
Yeah.
And that will change the landscape, no pun intended, ultimately.
And Trevor, I'll go to you now.
Yeah.
I want to follow up on that question, and I'll add one little comment here. I've seen there is a major, formerly United States-based brewing company who was leading the charge on sustainability efforts. It was Miller Coors, and I think they're Molson Coors now.
Mm-hmm.
And I know their head of sustainability over there, and she's done a fantastic job. She's been there for quite a while now in the realm of sustainability. They were on the cutting edge of things. And I will never forget the first time I heard her present, she mentioned how they were working with their growers on the grower side, growing the barley, hops, et cetera, and looking for opportunities to become more sustainable. And one of the things they did, it's a very simple thing when thinking about, center pivot irrigation, but they just replaced the nozzles and the sprinklers and removed an end gun and saved so much water and increased their yield. And they won all kinds of prizes, water prizes throughout the United States in doing that, right? And it's such a simple concept in our industry's mind, but had so much benefits, and they were widely recognized nationwide because of this. And so there's a lot of opportunity there.
Right. Yeah, no, completely. And that's one of the biggest things that you look at it from social responsibility for sustainability, right? Is they're looking at that capacity, not to just help out their growers who are providing barley, right, for their services as a part of their organization. It goes back to, it really goes back to a larger level, and it is from an industry perspective. And I think what's driving that home is, again, the amount of it. It doesn't matter whether it's, to me, it's, water is the one determinant for crop growth, for yield, right, for landscape. That's just flat out what it becomes. But then you start looking at it from a sustainability perspective. To me, it looks, it is just by those simple acts, right? And notoriously, and I knew this growing up as a part of it and being in the industry, and the simple technologies that were actually out there. A lot of our stuff was still manual because, the adoption curve of technology hadn't really thrived and hit yet. So I'm this young kid working on dad and grandpa and uncle's farm, and that's 4,000 acres going into potatoes, reading water meters that are doing hand pump, right? I mean, and you're basically taking this big graph book to get your 7-day forecast of, and a lot of this of what you've seen is no longer that piece, right? And for them, as you point out as an example, they disbanded what I would call the pray and spray model, right? That's because that's really what you were doing. You were praying and spraying, hopefully that it was in the right spot at the right time. And now this is it's becoming more nomenclature as a part of it. But we're looking at those areas that, and I think from an industry perspective, and that's not just from ag, this is from landscape as well, right? And you're looking at the areas of water saving, energy savings, and what are the two most powerful things, at least from a center pivot, that you control is power and water.
Yeah.
Right. And so what are some of those sustainability acts, some of the areas that we can do? Some of it I've seen happen in the Western Hemisphere, that in areas starting to work more towards, and this is kind of outside these businesses of what our normal go-to has always been, is water demand response programs, right? California working with PG&E, working with those fresh produce growers, which we know a lot of the fresh produce comes from the state of California. And they generally, when PG&E has issues of rolling blackouts, which that will happen next month in SoCal, we all know this, it is a pattern, right? It's our job to study patterns as well, no different in technology. But they'll go to the grower, but they only have 48 hours to decide when they come to you and say, hey, John, I need to redistribute the grid down in this particular area for the city to get power. Can you shut these 3 fields off, right? And as a part of that, for 48 hours, unless you have the right knowledge set, the right skill set, the right, technology to adapt, it's hard to make those decisions, about crop stress and, am I overwatering? Am I underwatering? Am I at the right moisture level? But this is how you're having to look to adapt, right? But you're now starting to work, companies like us and others, I'm sure, are looking to say, okay, how am I going to work with the Millers? How am I going to work with the PepsiCos?
Yep.
Right? They are seeing a lot of this. Large retail growers, I know that we've looked at as a part of it, especially within cotton. They are trying to create less of that carbon footprint. And they're coming, and the one place that they're coming to is for irrigation, right? And it's not just for us to sell things. This is for us to really be able to come in and say, okay, I know on my farm, that we farmed, on average, I would say anywhere between 10 to 20%, I was either over or under watering. And that was a very simple shovel test for me to come in and grab the roots. And if I was going about, 2 feet down in hay, I knew that I was, not getting where I needed to be, which means the evapotranspiration and all of that was burning off at the top of the leaves. And I wasn't really practicing what I was really needing to practice. And so I think that's really where we start looking at is these different ways of technology that we're adapting, but starting to work in a joined kind of force and creating better consortiums with these large, commercial retail outlets who are also trying to create, water credits.
Yeah.
Right? As a part of that. And I see that's where the social responsibility has really come into effect to make this a real thing. And then this is how we're trying to make sure that we're not catching up and just reacting, but proactively going out and seeking those partnerships that are in adjacent areas that we thought, maybe once that wasn't important has now become in the last 3, 4, 5 years, very important because to Warren's point, water is not the same cost everywhere. And that is so, it's undermined a lot in my opinion. I mean, our shallowest well that we would have to get water from, from a deep well to water crops in Idaho was 350 feet. I mean, that's pretty deep. And that was one of our shallowest wells, right? You go out into the regions of Colorado, people forget they're a mile up, right? You got to go even further to tap into a lot of that of what doesn't run off. So I think, with a lot of these different technologies, this is where we're trying to simplify the equation, but then also be smart about it and say, hey, where are the real things that we can do socially to, create a bigger impact with these large organizations?
Yeah. I have 2 more questions for you guys, and then we can wrap things up. I would be remiss if we didn't bring up it's kind of the manufacturing side of the equation too, because sustainability is not just about what we grow, saving water. It's about how we conduct our businesses as well. And Warren, it's one thing that you worked on for a distribution company, as well as for a manufacturer. Do you want to talk about some of the things that you guys are working on, either at Hunter specifically or through your efforts at the IAA broadly?
Yeah, well, this is a good time to give a plug for the Common Interest Group, the Sustainability Common Interest Group. You mentioned earlier about me wanting to have an impact on our industry while I was president in the association. And so we've had 2 discussions, I think we've had 2 meetings so far, one before as a workshop, a second one officially as a Common Interest Group. And if anybody that's watching or listening to this would like to get involved and, that's part of the association, to be part of the discussion about how we look at sustainability for the irrigation industry. And this is both ag and turf and landscape, so it's not just one-sided. Definitely encourage you to reach out to myself or to John to join the movement. And we're actually getting ready to have our next call next week, actually, kind of to regroup. We kind of took some time off because of all the stuff going on that had everybody else focused on other things, of course. Yeah, from a manufacturing side, it's everything from, the materials that we use. I mean, let's face it, the majority of what we make as a manufacturer is made from plastic and has been made from resins. And so, and I don't, by no means do I have a crystal ball, but I don't see that changing tomorrow. So how do we look at using as little material as possible, or reduce our material use, reduce our waste of material, scrap material on the products that we do manufacture. How do we incorporate more recycled product, whether it's our own products, or how do we find other sources for the material that becomes waste from our manufacturing process, is something that's real important. How do we look at, again, the amount of water that we use, the amount of energy that we use in manufacturing is significant. And how do we reduce that and improve our efficiencies? We've looked at things, as I've learned about coming on board, of our injection molding machines that were traditionally hydraulic machines, and now we're moving to electric, and the amount of energy that saves. They use electricity, but they use a significantly less amount of electricity, and they're more efficient. And so it's pretty exciting to see where technology is going to help make those things possible.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the other thing that's really important is educating our employees about that as well, and where they fit in with that. That it's not just a company thing; they're part of the organization, and they have the ability to impact our uses and material uses, and also our environmental impact as well.
So Trevor, you're with the Center Pivot, manufacturer, a lot of steel used there.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about some of the things that you guys how you view sustainability comes to the manufacturing process?
Sure. Yeah. At the end of the day, right, Valley is a part, right? One division is a brand, right? It's a large brand, which really started Valmont itself, and maybe most people don't really kind of realize that. But that's sustainability is at the core of our organization, because of the pipe, because of the steel, because what we found in the early stages, and most people who may or may not know, is that an irrigation pipe, when stood up vertically, makes a great smart pole, right? It makes great lamp post, makes a great traffic stop, a traffic light, right? That hangover is a part of it. It makes a great cell tower for an infrastructure piece is a part of it. So a lot of what you see around really originated from the ag space, from the irrigation segment, as a part of it. And if you know who Valmont is, our tagline really is conserving those resources and improving life. And it's at the core of the products that we serve and we provide in sustainable infrastructure development and the most efficient use of water in agriculture. And a part of that is also how we do the reclamation of when we're building steel, right? It's we're in a large campus where we are, right? And it's also creating better productivity, but better use of power and energy. Everything that we've switched out from gas to electric, as much that we can to move pipe around as well, just as a part of that footprint. Most recently from, I'll plug a little bit of some of our recent activities is the solar side, right? We just recently bought a huge solar organization down, Solbras, down in Brazil, right? And a part of that was to also apply then to building better infrastructure for those who can't get out into the remote locations, but then also those who are looking at, in rural, not just rural communities, but also in smart city systems. So I think a lot of what we look at in terms of those practices is we're making sure that, one, we're trying to find the most efficient ways to reduce a lot of those emissions, and and being able to find out different ways of reclamation. I think that's the biggest thing that we kind of look at as a part of it. But those are also things that we are also doing as a part of our employee awareness that we do. And for us, and which is interesting for me, I haven't seen, I haven't been part of too many companies who do this, but as a part of our quarterly results, we do this where we bring in a full waves of our employees, right? There's 1,200 people on campus out at Valley. And we make sure we let them know where we are, right? What we're doing to continue to practice those pieces, how we're keeping them safe, and what we're doing to reduce a lot of those things so that they can go ahead and be able to, that's our social responsibility, so they can go home to their families and say, hey, here's what we're doing to be a part of something beyond helping build things better, right? Here's how we're preserving, so you as an up and coming, right, still have things to work with in a great way.
So my last question is, and I'd be remiss if I didn't bring this up, and I'll start with Trevor and then I'll finish up with Warren. How has COVID-19 changed sustainability for your parts of the industry? This is something that is going to be part of our lives. I think it's changed us as individuals forever. even though life probably will get back to normal in a year or two, we will slip back into normalcy. We weren't even aware of the full ramifications of the flu pandemic of 1918 until now. So we just lived our lives, right? So things will slip back into normalcy, but I think everything, including who we are as human beings, have changed. How has that changed for you? I know, Trevor, on the ag side, you're looking at everything from the distribution channels to how things are grown, where they go, how dependent ag is on hospitality and schools. I mean, this is all coming to limelight, right? You mentioned people are reading where food comes from.
Yeah.
That wasn't the norm, And so how in viewing it from sustainability, how have things changed?
Well, I think from our perspective, one, as you know, agriculture is a very relational business, right? You have relationships with your growers as a part of it. I don't care if you're an OEM manufacturer, if you're the dealer selling them the equipment as a part of it. I recall my times as a kid going into our John Deere shop and my dad going in and getting parts. It was there to have a conversation. I was there to look at all the cool John Deere toys as a 10-year-old and pull them off the shelf. And it's a relational piece, right? So when you look at this as a part of what's going on and how it's affected things, it's in a more remote way. We're not just adapting to that. The growers are adapting to that. Not just from the relationships they have and the business that we try and keep them, provided with and the services to keep them running, but it's for them, it's also it's the turnaround of how are they going to continue to supply, right? To your point, to the restaurants, to the hospitality business. Those contracts are only so good as far as how you can actually serve them. And, the supply chain bridge is out. It's been out. And it has to be rebuilt as a part of that. And that means pivoting and shifting to a different way to be able to supply, right? And growers have kind of had to take that into their own hands. They've had to hop on flights to go out and start negotiating with some of those organizations and saying, okay, I can adjust, or they have to buy new technologies and what they normally would put for something that was going to be processed is to figure out how they are going to do it in a fresh packed way that they can at least break even and lose at least amount of profitability so that they can be here next year. Yeah. Because like you said, this is going to take 18, 24 months as a recovering effort. But, that's one of the biggest things that I've seen with this industry is that they've had to really become more of the front line rather than really brokering through what they have been accustomed to as a part of it. And I think for everybody out there, it's been welcoming from a consumer perspective, right? This is, I think, the one thing that has really just been a huge eye opener. And I kind of came up with this tagline, was if you eat, you're in farming.
Yeah, right? That's right. Yeah.
That is a world you live in now. And this is where I think the caring actually has started. And it's been refreshing, as I would say, as anything else, to be able to see and people actually start to look at, how they're going to start participating in a lot of this. Right. So I would definitely welcome anybody as well to come. Irrigation Association, I'm sure, will have a lot of this information and where this ties back to that as a part of that. So I'm looking forward to that as well.
Good. And Warren, I tell you, I've never seen, with all of us being at home, right? And all three of us are at our homes right now. People are valuing where they live now more than my lifetime. I think your lifetimes too. They're valuing their outdoor spaces. Then you go to a garden center where they were able to remain open, or to one of the box stores who have garden centers. They've been packed with people doing work outside the homes, inside the homes. And I think COVID-19 is really, hopefully, one of the things that will stick around is that appreciation for the value that our outdoor spaces bring. Because otherwise, personal perspective, I'd be going insane if I was not able to go outside of my house and enjoy our green spaces when they're available. So I know same question for you. How COVID-19, how has it changed sustainability in your mind for your segment of the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, just start at the beginning and look at the amount of effort that you and the Irrigation Association and the other professional organizations put into allowing our businesses to remain open
Yeah.
as essential businesses. I mean, that was, I'm trying to think of what the word I wanted to say. Anyway, I can't even think of the word. Heroic. That was a huge task and a ton of work that went into doing that. And because of that, more people are aware of our profession now too.
Yeah.
I think because of that, more people, I hope, value what organizations like the IA do for them. That it's not, they're actually out there fighting for their businesses to remain functioning and sustainable for that matter. And so I think that's one of the positive things that's come out of this for sure. And I agree with you, this connecting with I mean, it's amazing how packed the garden centers are. And think about the fact that because we couldn't travel, we couldn't take our vacations, people are spending money on their own landscapes and their own,
do you know how difficult it is to get an inflatable pool right now? It is nearly impossible. Just heads up, if you're in the market for one, it's very difficult to find.
Yeah, I mean, it's and it's so I think that's something that's changed, and I think that's for the good. I also would say that, and we could have a whole other discussion about this too, but the technology aspect, how it's played into how we operate our lives every day. If COVID hadn't happened, the chances of the three of us being on a Zoom meeting, it would have been a phone call, right?
Yeah.
We wouldn't be doing it on video.
Right.
And like I said earlier, I would never have told you that I would have worked from in my home office for 3 months every day. And I don't think it's going to go back to normal. I don't necessarily think it's going to be the same. There'll be some sense of normalcy.
Yeah.
But I think we'll look at why do we need to travel? Is it really important? Again, another topic for a whole other discussion about how we're going to reach our members as an association. What do trade shows and conferences look like in the future? You can't, Trevor said it earlier, we are a relationship industry. We can't do all of this through cameras and Zoom meetings. No. We do need to see each other in person, but we will probably do it differently post-COVID, post-pandemic, just kind of looking at how we do everything. And so that, to me, the silver lining in all that is exciting because I think there's some good change that will come from that. What is it going to be? I don't have a crystal ball yet, but I have some ideas. So I think that is definitely a result of what we've been living through.
Yeah, I agree. And, you brought up keeping our industry as essential services and critical infrastructure. And who would have thought that, 4 months ago, these terms weren't even in the back of our minds. Right. It was these agencies, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Administration. Who in the world has ever heard of that before COVID-19 hit, right? But that document became pretty powerful. And, water continues to be, as far as critical infrastructure of the United States, riddled throughout that document. Agriculture, same thing. Fortunately, we had landscapes called out on that, which is great. Landscapers and the landscaping industry is critical infrastructure. And so, I'm with you guys. I think there are some good things that are going to come out of this, and I'm glad that sustainability continues to be a part of our fibers and who we are, our beings, and what drives us moving forward, because that's going to be a pretty important part of our industry moving forward. I mean, it's more important now than ever, right, to be sustainable. I mean, in these socioeconomic times.
Yeah, I would also add that look how quickly everybody was able to adapt to this. Businesses, the government, I mean, look how quickly we were able to keep our businesses operational and keep our employees safe, especially, for those of us in the manufacturing world or any business with their employees. I mean, to think how quickly those changes happen, which in the past would have taken years. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit.
It
would have taken a long time. And so if there's, again, something else we can learn, from this is that we can make positive impacts. We can change if unfortunately, we were forced to, in order to just kind of think on the fly and keep things moving. But I think that's another thing that's going to hopefully leave its mark on this time is that, and I think that's part of what's going to, and you've seen all the not rhetoric, but you've seen all the push on the sustainability industry outside of our space on like, we need to focus and pay attention to what's going on with the climate and make those kind of changes quickly, or we're not going to have one to exist in, somewhere down the line in the future.
Yeah. Well, guys, thank you very much for spending the time today to go over sustainability on our little podcast. Warren, I appreciate your bear in the background. That was great to spend time with your Campbell. Is that his name? Is it
Campbell.
a he? He? Okay.
Yeah, and if you want a fun video to watch.
Here we go. Okay, hold on. Everybody get a pen and paper. If you're not driving, which you shouldn't be, where are you going anyway? Yeah. Stay home. All right, get a pen and paper.
First of all, if it put a smile on your face, then I did my job by having Campbell in the background. But there's a great video. There's a couple videos on YouTube from some theme parks in one in the Netherlands where they were testing one of their roller coasters, and they loaded it up with teddy bears like this, and they seatbelted them in, and they put a video camera in front, and it's hysterical because they're going over the thing, and their arms are going
up and down. Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, and they're like going back and forth. They're having a great old time,
So if that just puts a smile on your face, then then I've done my job today. For those people that are watching, yes.
All right, guys. Well, hopefully I get to see both of you in person sometime soon. The last time I saw Trevor, it was early March. We were in a crowded restaurant, like a packed restaurant.
Yeah,
the thought of that gives me the heebie-jeebies.
I know. And then immediately right after.
I know. Right after we're in quarantine, it's like, oh my gosh. Anyway. All right, guys. I really appreciate it. Thanks for the time. And Trevor, Warren, hopefully we get to see each other soon. And more information about the common interest group, irrigation.org. Trevor, what's your guys' website? Valley.com?
ValleyIrrigation.com.
ValleyIrrigation.com. And Warren, yours is?
HunterIndustries.com.
HunterIndustries.com. Awesome. All right, guys. Thanks for joining us. See you soon. Bring Wire Life.
Thank you.
This podcast was brought to you by Irrigation and Green Industry, the leading business magazine for landscape and irrigation contractors. For the latest industry news and the digital edition, visit www.igin.com.